If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. The best way to entertain your players on your Rust server is by having events that they can join, play around, murder each other, maybe even practice some of their skills, and then get rewarded for it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Rust Admin Academy, where I'm teaching you everything that you need to know about owning and operating a successful Rust server. On this channel, I do plugin reviews and tutorials, plus I want to give you all of the tips and tools that are going to make your Rust server ownership so much easier. If you're brand new to my channel, consider subscribing so that you stay up to date on everything that we're working on and to get the latest updates on the Rust development world. I'll remind you a couple of times throughout the video to hit that like button if you're enjoying what you're watching, so please remember to do so. All right, let's get on to today's video. Now, I've been wanting to do this video for a really long time, but I had to wait until I put out enough videos that showed you the backbone of how to actually make this work so that you have the skills that are required in order to make this all work together without running into any issues. Now, the plugin that I want to tell you about today is called EventManager, and it's available from umod.org. As always, the link for everything that you're going to need is going to be in the description box down below. So the reason why I was saying that I wanted you to have a specific set of skills before we get started on EventManager is because there's actually 5 different plugins that are required in order to make this work. We have to have the event manager itself. We also need to have what's called the EM interface, or the events manager interface. We also need to have event statistics, Rust kits, spawns database, as well as zone manager. So now I've done videos on all 3 of those last 3 plugins. So anytime I can, I'm going to put a card in the top right hand corner directing you to go to a video that's going to go more in depth into each one of those individual plugins. So right out of the gate, just to get the events manager up and running, we need 6 plugins in total. So this video is going to turn into a very large body of work. I'm going to try and make it so that it doesn't take forever to teach you everything that you need to know about it. But just in case it does, I might actually have to break this up into shorter videos. We'll see how it actually plays out. All right, so first things first, we have to download and install all of the plugins that are required to make this work. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of all 6 of these plugins. So before I go ahead and get started with all of that, just know that if you try to install Event Manager without installing EM Interface at the same time, as well as the statistics plugin, each one of them is going to be looking for the other one to actually be in your server before it's going to successfully compile and load that plugin. So as you can see there, I just installed Event Manager by itself, and it actually gave me a warning on the screen there saying couldn't find the required plugin EM interface for Event Manager. And this time I just installed EM interface, and of course getting a similar response saying, hey, we need to have the statistics plugin as well. And then once you have all 3 of those base plugins, the base Event Manager plugins, once you reload Event Manager and it sees the other 2 that it's looking for, it's going to reload everything. You're going to be good to go. Now you're going to notice on my screen here that I've got 3 events that are already installed in there. Don't worry, we're going to get into that in just a couple of minutes. But just so that we're super clear right off the bat, what we've done so far with those 3 base plugins doesn't actually give you any events on your server. It just gives you the foundation in order to actually set the events up. You, of course, would head back over to umod and search through some of the events that QLU has available that works well with Events Manager. So we've got Last Man Standing, Capture the Flag, a slasher event, which is pretty cool, chopper survival, team deathmatch, regular solo deathmatch, and then of course gun game. So you don't have to have all of these events on your server. You can just have one. You can have a combination of any one of them. Once you decide which event you want to have on your server, just download that plugin, drop it into your plugins folder, reload the events manager. It's going to recognize that you've now installed an event and will allow you access to use it in your server. Once we have all those plugins set up and running, we need to go in the server and deal with a couple of permissions. So for this video, I'm going to be using admin menu from Chaos Code, which was actually created by the same developer that created Events Manager, QLU. So we do /admin in chat, go into permissions, we're going to deal with group, and then we're going to go into the admin category, and we want to scroll over till we find this section right here, eventmanager.admin. This permission allows us to bring up the Event Manager interface and interact with it as an admin as opposed to just a regular player. Once we're finished with the permissions, go in chat, type /event. That'll bring up the Events Manager interface like what you're seeing on my screen. So that permission that we just granted allowed us access to this admin tab that won't be there for regular players that are trying to interact with different events. So in the admin tab, this is where we get to create events, we can start events, we can cancel existing events. So to create an event, I would click on create event, obviously, but because I've unloaded those event plugins just for this video to show you what it looks like if you don't actually install any of those events, there's nothing to show on this screen. So I'm going to act like I'm installing a plugin when in fact I'm actually just reloading a plugin that was already there from before. So I'm just going to load in Deathmatch. Go back in game, click over to the admin tab. Let's click on create event. Now you can see that I have an option there called Deathmatch because I've now installed that Deathmatch plugin from UMod. So I think this is where a lot of people get really confused or intimidated, or I'm not really sure, but it's actually a really quite simple setup. And if you just go through each individual section here and pay attention to what it's asking for, this is going to go very easily for you. It's now then these parameters here where people start getting stumbled up. So we have to have zone ID, we have to have spawn file, we have to have our kits, we have to have all that stuff pre-built before we can actually go in and start creating an event. So I'm hoping most of you already have Rust kits installed, you already have Spawn's database, maybe not Spawn's database, and you should already have Zone Manager installed on your server. If you don't already have those plugins, now's the time to go get them. Again, links are in the video description down below. Before we go any further, have you liked the video yet? Have I earned your subscription? Do me a favor and click on that thumbs up down below. It really helps me out a lot. And of course, if you want to stay up to date on everything else that we're working on over at Rust Admin Academy, make sure you click on that subscribe. But before we can actually do anything, we have to create the arena area where we want this event to take place. We have to create the spawn file. We have to create the kits that we want our players to have once they actually enter the event. Like, there's kind of a lot of work that goes into creating each individual event. So let's deal with the zone first. That was the first piece of information that we needed on our event manager. So let's deal with that first. So there's a couple of things that we can do here. So we can designate a certain area of our map just with the existing terrain and trees and whatever happens to be there already. All you have to do is set a zone in that area where you want the event to take place, and that will work. However, my suggestion is you head on over to the Fortify workshop, you download one of the pre-built arenas that are already there, or of course you can build your own arena, whichever works better for you. And you can then insert that arena into your server and use that as the place where the event is going to take place. So for this video, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a pre-built arena so I don't have to do any work there. I'm going to spawn it in a location where players can't get to it unless they've actually joined the event, so it's not at risk on the ground. All right, so there we go. Here's our arena. Let me just let it finish spawning in. There we go. This is the arena that we're going to be using for this specific event. So now the first piece of information we needed for the event manager was the zone ID. So because we're using Zone Manager, and if you haven't already, you need to install Zone Manager. And we're going to go in chat. We're going to type /zone_add. That's going to create a zone. As you can see there, we've got this blue sphere in the middle of this arena. We of course want to make that a little bit bigger. So we'll do zone radius 75. That should make it big enough to encompass this entire arena. All right. Perfect. That worked out exactly the way that I hoped that it would. And of course, if there's some details about this zone that you would like to add, now would be the time to do that. You do /zone flags. That's going to bring up the Zone Manager UI situation where you can turn things on or off based on how you want things to actually act inside this zone. We're not going to get into any of that on this video. It's all been covered on previous videos. But the information that we do need is the zone ID. So you do /zone in chat. It's going to spit up a bunch of information for you. And the number that we want here is 889955519. So if it were me building this for the very first time, I would write that number down because as you remember in the event manager interface, that's what it's asking for is the zone ID. So the next thing that we need to deal with is the spawn file. So where do we want players to spawn after they've joined this event and have now become a part of this arena? So what we need to do is create a spawns database of where we want these players to spawn. So if you don't have the spawns database plugin installed on your server yet, go ahead and do that right now. Once you have it installed and the permissions granted to yourself or to your admin group, we want to create a new spawns database. We do /spawns new. That's going to say you're now creating a new spawns file. And the command to add a new spawn location is /spawns add. So just put your player character wherever you want this one spawn location to be. Go in chat and type /spawns add. And I like to copy this to my clipboard because I'm going to paste this back a couple of different times for each individual spawn location. So we're going to add one right there. Let's go over here. We'll add another one right here. And as you can see, it's counting up in the chat there, telling you how many spawns you've added. So let's do another one here. And you could do as many of these spawn locations as you want. This is just determining where the players are going to go once they've joined the event. So that's spawn location 4. That's enough as an example. Like I said before, you can do as many of these spawn locations as you want. It's also important to note that as you're adding more and more events, you can have different spawn locations using different spawn database files. So before we're finished with that, we're going to do /spawns. We're going to save. We're going to give this a file name. I'm just going to call this test deathmatch. I have to spell it correctly though. There we go. So /spawns save test deathmatch. So it responds back saying 4 spawn points saved into test deathmatch. So now we have the zone ID, we have the spawn file already created. The next thing is what kits are we going to actually use for this one event. So it's important to note that when a player joins your event, they're going to be stripped of everything that they have on their player character. All of their inventory is going to be taken away. They don't lose it. It just gets stored away in a file somewhere so that when they join the event, they don't have any of that stuff on them. Kind of evens the playing field so that people can't bring things to an event. It might give them an unfair advantage. So to build the kits that they are going to land with, you get to go into your Rust kits editor. You get to start creating different kits, and some of the events plugins allow you to select which kit you want to use. Some of them don't. So for some of those events, Team Deathmatch, for example, you'd want to have different kits that look different so that people can identify who's on their team and who isn't. So for Team Deathmatch, you would definitely want to have at least 2 different kits built. So because we're doing this on my actual live server where there are actual live events going, I already have some kits already made up. So I've got TDM Team White and I've got TDM Team Blue. Now obviously that only makes sense in a TDM type situation. We can just create a kit that doesn't necessarily have like a team aspect to it, so the colors don't really matter so much. So I've done lots of videos on how to deal with Rust kits. I'm going to try to put a couple of cards up in the right hand corner there, so if you want to check some of those out, it goes really in depth in how to deal with the Rust kits. So if you have any questions about kits, it's probably going to be in one of those videos. All right, so now we have the zone ID, we have the spawn file, we also have the kits. Because I don't know off the top of my head, we're going to see if we can actually select multiple kits for this event. Oh, actually no, that doesn't make sense because I think that's why we can select this use class selector. So this would allow you to select a different kit if there was more than one available. Time limit, obviously, how long do we want this event to last for? Score limit, what is the win? What is the end of the event? So like 10 or 20 kills, whatever you decide that you want it to be, that will automatically end the event even if we haven't reached the end of the timer yet. Minimum players, maximum players, and do you want to close the event when the event actually starts? Or do you want it to remain open so that players can join it as the event is ongoing? Do you want to be one of the glorious souls on these lists right here that have decided to support what I'm doing at Rust Admin Academy? If you do, you can join as a member right here on YouTube by clicking on that red join button down below, or you can head on over to patreon.srtbull.com. Thank you all so much for your support. There's no way that I could continue doing what I'm doing over at Rust Admin Academy without your endorsement. All right, so let's go in and start filling some of this information in. So we're going to give this event a title. We're going to pick this zone ID because we wrote this information down earlier, but it's also the last one that we created, so I know that it's the last one on this list. The spawn file, we named it as test deathmatch. That's really hard to say really fast. And we're going to give it some kits. So I'm just going to do TDM white for this one. If you want to get into the class selector and allow your players to select which kit that they want to use, then sure, you would put in multiple kits and turn on the class selector option. Time limit in seconds, 600 seconds is 10 minutes. Put in a score limit of 10. Minimum players 1, maximum players, let's say 10. And do you want to close the event on start? I'll leave that open because this isn't actually going to stay as an active event on my server because I already have other events. And then once we're done with all of that, we click on the save button in the top right hand corner. I had to make sure that my massive head wasn't blocking that. Click on save, takes us back to the main menu, and we can now open this event to test it out and make sure that it's actually going to work properly. So we click on open event. We slide on over to test deathmatch for YouTube because that's what we named this event. It opens up that event, allowing other players to join it. And if the players on your server wanted to, they do /event in chat, and then they would just click on this gray button right here called enter event. And that's pretty well the long and the short of EventManager. This used to be a really complicated plugin, and thank goodness KillU went through and refined how all of this stuff actually works together, because this process is a hell of a lot easier than it used to be. There's a lot of different steps involved and a lot of different plugins that you have to use along the way. But once you get the hang of it, it's actually really easy. I've found that when I'm helping people actually deal with the problems, they're not actually having issues. They just get overwhelmed by all of the different things that you have to do and the different steps that you have to take in order to make this plugin actually work. They go through and let's say they don't actually have Zone Manager installed. Well, they can't get a zone ID, so they stumble right on that point and they just say, oh, this plugin doesn't work. Well, no, that's not necessarily the case. You're just missing a really small detail. So on my specific server, I've got this arena that I use and players do join the events and go around and play around in here. But I've also got this other arena over here. So I'm using the exact same event manager and I've got another event that happens over in that arena right there. That one's kind of like a primitive medieval type thing where people could only have bows and arrows and stuff like that. It just shows you the power that this event manager actually has. It can run different events at different times in different locations. And as I've covered in previous videos, I'm doing this all up in the sky. None of what's happening up here can even be viewed or heard from down on the ground where the other players are that haven't joined any of these events. So what happens when a player wins an event? I'm actually a little bit disappointed to see that we can't define what the prize is directly on the EMI. I actually thought you could. So if we go into the configuration file for Event Manager, we can define in there how much and of what the player is going to get if they win one of these events. So we've got amount awarded for a kill, amount rewarded for a win, and amount rewarded for a headshot, and then of what. So by default, this is set up to just pay them out in scrap. So it's a good way for players to get scrap on your server. If you're using economics or server rewards, you of course can change these values to be more reflective of server rewards or economics or Rust dollars, whatever you want to call them. And then the plugin will pay them in one of those two other currencies. It works pretty good at scrap, but depending on what kind of economy you've got going on your server, maybe one of those other two makes more sense. While we're looking at it, I might as well show you the other features of the configuration file for Events Manager. This is the list of the events that it's going to cycle through. Obviously, the more events that you have set up on your server, the more will show in this list. This information is grabbed directly from the EMI. This isn't manually inserted by me. Do you want to randomize the event selection, true or false? And then you get to select the auto event interval. So how much time is going to pass in between each event before the next one triggers? It's good to know that some commands are actually blocked by default by the plugin. So players can't TP out, they can't TPR, they can't do anything with teleportation by default. They can't grab another kit. They can't teleport to outpost. And you of course can go through and add different commands to this list if there's other things that you want to block out. Let's say /bank if you're running a bank plugin, or whatever. There's a lot of different things that you could do here to limit what your player can do once they're actually inside the event. You got to keep it fair, don't forget. So I did say that this was going to be a rather large body of work, and I knew that it was going to be because there's just so many different aspects and different tools that you need to use in order to make this all work. So I'm going to try and trim this video down to a reasonable length. I know not everyone likes 20-25 minute long videos, but as you can see by this point, there's a reason why this one had to be this long. And even at that, I know that there's things that I didn't cover in this video that is going to help you be more successful with Event Manager. But honestly, just in the interest of time, I cannot do that in one video. I would have viewers that would they would be very angry with me. I've got this one guy that keeps sending me comments saying your videos are too long, your videos are too shitty, I don't understand what you're doing. Like, it's just brutal. This guy's just brutal to me. And if I didn't let it float off my back, I'd probably quit YouTube. But yeah, he's out there and I don't know what he's trying to do, but he's trying to get me to quit, I'm pretty sure. Guess what? Ain't gonna happen. All right, that's it for Event Manager. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave that thumbs up for me because it really helps me push this information out to other people. I hope everyone has enjoyed their summer off. I know that's brutal to say because I know there's so many situations going on around, especially North America, but definitely all around the world as well. People are struggling. I know everyone's having a hard time. Just know that I feel you. I know where you're at. I wish you all the best, and I hope everybody's doing well. Everyone's all back to school. Parents are all freed up from their kids now. Hopefully we can just get back into the Rust mindset for the next little while and not have to worry about any of the serious things that are going on in the world. That's my hope, but we all know that that's not actually going to happen. All right, thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, click that button down there. If you want to support what I'm doing at Rust Admin Academy, click on the Patreon button over there. And of course, do me a favor and check out this video on the left-hand side. If I can get you all to click on that video and actually watch it, YouTube does me a favor and pushes my videos out to more and more people. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next week. And yes, I do actually mean that.